Hello, I'm the Nostalgia Critic guy. Remember it so you don't have to. You hear it all the time from people. Summer movies aren't what they used to be. Nobody makes them like they used to anymore. Well, in some respects, they're kind of right. In the grand history of cinema, we've both visually and with character pushed the boundaries of what can be done. Some of these marvels are so incredible that you could argue we'll never recapture it again. But that's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is people who grew up in the 90s saying that they don't make summer movies like they used to. Bull fucking shit. A lot of people forget there was a dark time in our history where summer movies were just expected to suck. Now again, I'm talking specifically about summer movies. Good films came out around award season, and yes, there are a long list of summer films in the past that are terrible then and are terrible now. But honest to God, there was a period of time when audiences just accepted the fact that every summer we were gonna get something that was really stupid and most likely we're not going to enjoy. Instead of having movies like, say, The Avengers, Hunger Games, the Lego Movie, and once in a while a Transformers 4, for a while, every movie we got was Transformers 4! That's right, good summer movies were the exception. They rarely happened. And yeah, some films were just underwhelming, not the worst, but didn't leave much of an impression on you. But hey, that still counts as not a good movie too. I remember this dark age so well, I can even pinpoint the exact years it happened, 1996 to 2001. Now to best understand why this is, it's best to look at the films that came out prior and after. A little before 1996, we made an amazing discovery, CGI. With films like Jurassic Park, Terminator 2, and Forrest Gump, we were suddenly realizing that we had a tool that could make us see whatever we wanted to see. Even the greatest effects of the past had some limitations, but now, if you could imagine it, it could exist. But sadly, like the discovery of anything new, the excitement of one element often overshadows the other important ones. For example, when Super Mario Bros. Came out, nobody cared what the story was. We were just so excited to see something so groundbreaking and new. Now since then, games have gotten a lot more complex and interesting. But that's because the novelty of what Super Mario Bros. Brought us has worn off. It's still a good game, but obviously we crave something new and challenging. Thus, we need to focus back on those essential elements again. Games now have interesting characters, fascinating stories, and incredible effects to make them much more interesting games. The exact same thing could be said for CGI in film. Once we knew anything was possible, we exploited it. And I mean, really exploited it. Suddenly, every movie was a disaster film. Twister, Independence Day, we had 2 asteroid movies and 2 volcano movies the exact same year. And guess what? All of them had little to no story, the most basic of cookie-cutter stereotypes, and the star of the film was always the effects. Explosions, storms, lava, you name it. But the audience was so excited because we've never seen effects like this at the time. And back then, they were seen as really good. But on top of that, the action could be a lot faster. You didn't need stuntmen, you could just green screen it. All the close calls were made a lot closer because you could digitally make it look like they really were. However, years later, they're mostly really dated, leaving us now not only with unconvincing effects, but no interesting character or story, so there's really no reason to watch them, outside of getting a giggle about how dated they are. There was also an emphasis to tone down the muscle-bound action hero and make them more like the everyman. Not a bad idea, but again, they wanted to put more attention on the effects than on the characters, so they went for the easiest arc that was already dated from the 80s, the geek. Oh, not the funny geeks like what you see today, I'm talking Big Bang Theory geek blackface. The geeks that actually have no idea what a geek is. They just sort of gave them glasses and have them do something silly sometimes and boom, geek!
Coffee time! Coffee, cappuccino!
This arc was so easy because, hey, the main star's a geek. If he saves the day, he's already overcoming something because he's a geek and he never does anything. Cause he's a geek. But by God, these characters were terrible. Stuttering Jeff Goldblum, awkward Elijah Wood, divorcing Bill Paxton, Jeff Goldblum again! And of course, Matthew fucking Broderick.
That's a lot of fish.
God! The heroes that we used to look up to, like our comic book icons, well, they were being represented by Spawn and Batman and Robin. Because who cared? They were just stopping crime. They weren't running away from a tornado or an asteroid. A guy wearing tights wasn't a big deal, sinking the Titanic was a big deal. And seeing how that was the highest grossing movie of all time, you bet your ass there were a lot more disaster films that came out. And when I say disaster, I mean both literally and figuratively. You wanna know why these films aren't so inspiring and don't hold up anymore? Because these movies aren't about heroes, they're about survivors. And don't get me wrong, sometimes in life you just need to survive. It's totally understandable. But when everything, fucking everything is centered around just don't die, you're not inspiring people to do anything greater. And these films demonstrated that. Godzilla, Lost World, Speed 2, Lost in Space. Everything was a repeat of a formula we were already way too familiar with. And they sucked so hard. Remember the film Men in Black? It was a good film, right? It was funny, it was clever, it was well written. But when that movie came out, everybody was treating it like it was the second coming. Everybody was shocked. Holy shit, a summer film that can be smart and clever. What the fuck? And don't get me wrong, it's a decent flick, but back then, decent was amazing. Anything that was clever, creative, and most of all new was extremely rare. It was a gigantic hit with critics and audiences talking about it a lot. And yeah, once in a while we could get a good summer flick like Face Off or Mask of Zorro, but they were still pretty few and far between. And the absolute worst part of it is, we just accepted it. We didn't make a big deal. We didn't demand movies be better. We just sort of shrugged and walked out. We had more important things in our lives. Why should being challenged by art be one of them? So you might be asking yourself, what happened to get summer movies back on track? Well, a few things. One was the internet. Whereas before you got feedback from focus groups, which aren't the most reliable, and critics who offer good points of view, but many would argue don't always represent the everyman, suddenly we were getting feedback directly from the viewer, and it wasn't just word of mouth. Everyone could post in a forum how much they liked or disliked a film. And with great speed, too. Films like Bruno and After Earth were said to be destroyed by the Twitter effect, having a strong first day opening, but word spread so fast that it tanked before the weekend was over. Suddenly people could discuss in front of the world why a film was good or bad, and Hollywood can take better notes. Remember when the Turtles were gonna be aliens? You can thank the internet for fixing that, though Fitchner still would've rocked. On top of that, because we were getting so bored of the exact same thing, Hollywood tried to do something a little different. The exact opposite. Films like The Matrix and The Sixth Sense were coming out, which offered interesting twists and ideas that weren't in summer movies prior. Comic book films like X-Men and Spider-Man suddenly weren't just punches and catchphrases, they took time to show emotion and turmoil. More art house movies were getting attention, again partly because of new media. And then there were just weird ideas like Pirates of the Caribbean and Shrek. They were strange and odd, but by God, we just saw so much of the same thing, we were praying for strange and odd. The first fully CGI movie came out, launching Pixar movies that had child-friendly ideas every year, and they made money. Child-friendly moneymakers? That was unheard of at the time. And then of course there was a gigantic risk called Lord of the Rings. An expensive film trilogy that was all being shot at the same time and was going to be released one a year that was a fantasy. A fantasy! Those were box office bombs in the past. But all of these films were doing something that the films of the past 5 years didn't do. Think. They thought about character, they thought about story, they thought about what wasn't being done in theaters anymore. And they made those elements the stars again as opposed to the effects. Which is not to say a lot of them didn't have big effects, but they were no longer the focus. As you'd expect, all of these were big hits. And they put together this brilliant idea that maybe good characters and good story equals good movies. And maybe good movies could be profitable! A lot of producers saw what was going on and tried to plan their films accordingly. True, some of the trilogies didn't work, like The Matrix didn't please that many, nor did the Pirates films. But then you have something like the Marvel Universe. This isn't just a trilogy, this is a series of films all tied together. Do you know how much time, effort, and planning has to go into that? It's hard enough to get one movie off the ground, but a continuing story with dozens of directors, writers, and producers all having to be on the same page? You better be damn sure this is going to work. Thus, there's a lot more commitment to it. And even the films that aren't that great still aren't as bad as those previous 5 years. Yeah, Iron Man 2 wasn't so hot, but it tried a lot harder than Steel. Yeah, the Hulk wasn't that great, but it wasn't the Hulk. The focus is where it should be, even if it isn't always done spectacularly. That being the identifiable, strong, and different characters we haven't seen before on the big screen. A raccoon and a tree are our heroes now. A fucking yellow block can touch people's hearts. A teen with just a bow and an arrow can inspire a revolution. These are all characters that never would have flown in that previous 5 years. True, most of it's based on existing material, and I've done an editorial on that as well, but at least they're giving unique spins and interpretations. While the subjects have been done, the way they're being done has some interesting variations. Now, characters can think about their actions, they can show their emotions, they can inspire heroism and clever ideas. They're no longer exceptions to the rules. Good is the new good. So the two things I want you to take from this is, 1, be fucking grateful. So Captain America changed a few things. What do you want, a shot-by-shot remake of Psycho? So they made a Hobbit 3. Would you rather have Alien 4? It's fine to point out when a movie sucks, but don't act like they're the majority anymore, because we went through 5 fucking years of that. No matter how much you hate something now, guaranteed they would have done it worse in that time period. 2, I think everything will always go through peaks and valleys, even art. Who knows what the next generation will be inspired to create, and what they'll inspire for the next generation to create as well. We'll hit a similar low point again in our future, and when we do, it's important to realize that good and creative ideas will always come back. Because hey, when our main characters are looking more like this and less like this, there's still a lot of people out there who want to give us something pretty awesome. I'm a nostalgia critic guy, remember it so you don't have to.